S&P with a clear rejection. Right to the top with a doji, another doji, and then we broke, and then that was pretty much all she wrote. End of the day, we saw more selling. This little pattern I call devil horns. They see the two little horns sticking up. You got a little face here. Usually signifies a top, and that's exactly what it signified today. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. So we can see that the 200-day is right there. Bonk, 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 and we keep rolling and rolling. Subscribe and click all notifications. We put out daily videos on updates and alerts of indexes and stocks. So you see this little line right here? This is the lower low, 397.06. I'm going to use the SPY instead of the index tonight because this was so clean to look at. And you can see our level right here, 397.06, and then we broke down. As soon as we broke that, it was just the floodgates. And we just have that 45-degree selling, which is that signature institutional selling, right? They always just sell in that kind of angle because they're basically selling a certain amount during the day. Came right down to this 393.34, which we had the potential to hold, and we started just breaking level after level, right? This was a possible hold spot, and it looked like we might attempt that. And then we just reversed, 3-bar pattern, breaks down, forms this nasty little H, and this is where we are. Now we should talk about what got us here. Well, what got us here was core PPI, retail sales. So retail sales came in significantly worse than expected. Negative 1.1%. We were looking for negative 0.4%. Core PPI came in lighter at 5.5 versus 5.7. If we look at PPI itself, month over month was supposed to be negative 0.1. We came in at negative 0.5%. Sometimes good news is so good that it scares people. And retail sales month over month, we're looking for 0.8% negative, came in at 1.1. Now, as the day wore on, we gapped up on the news, which makes a lot of sense because we're looking for signs of inflation dissipating. And that bell has rung. Anyone that thinks that inflation has not peaked at this point just is not getting it. The PPI is actually a precursor to the CPI. If the producer's paying more, PPI is producer price index, if they're paying more, they're going to pass it on to the consumer. If they're not going to pass it on to the consumer. Don't make it more complicated than that. Keep it simple. But see the gap up? And then it started coming out like, wow, those numbers are so bad that earnings might even be worse than we think. And as that started spreading out during the day, you can see what happened. We just kept selling down. And then we had the 4 Fed speakers doing their daily routine to scare the heck out of everybody. And they did a fairly good job today. And then we just sold down as they kept saying, oh, we don't really care. We're just going to keep raising rates anyway. That kind of, and I'm paraphrasing obviously, but that kind of mentality, it's just startling the market. And we're seeing that happen here now. I have several ideas that I want to walk through possible trades, but we have to go through just the obvious, okay? We got to the 200-day moving average. We formed a very small bar right here, right? And what you want to do with these bars when you form them is you want to make sure you flip, because if you don't and you break, it gets nasty. It got nasty. And we took out the lower low, then we took out the previous day low, and then the previous day low from there. Now, just so we're clear, if you break that 390 tomorrow, as we stated earlier, you're looking, if you break that 390, you have a ways down here, okay? And we're going to have to really watch that, okay? Maybe this 386, maybe. I think you're heading more towards that 385 level. So there's our levels, and this is what's transpired. But there's a couple things that are pretty fascinating. To start with, the Dow actually did worse than the other underlying indexes. And you were down almost 2%, and now we're starting to see the MACD kind of roll here and start to point down. And I want to be really clear with everybody, this is just one day. But this is not what you want to see. You don't want to see us trying to break out and then pulling back down. So we're going to have to watch this. Now, getting back up to this 340 would be optimal. SDow is the first one I would watch tomorrow. And I would watch this more than I would even watch the NASDAQ right now. We're going to get into that in a moment. But the reason that I'm looking at this is perhaps we're seeing rotation. And it really felt like we did see a little rotation today. Now, rising tide lifts all boats, and when the tide goes out, everything comes down as well. But that really wasn't the case today, and we're going to get into that. Now, if this can pop up and make a higher high, that just means that the Dow made a lower low. I don't think you want to stay around for that. Also, we ran right into the 55 SMA. If we flip that tomorrow, that's going to be a higher high above it. Most likely we close above that, and that gives us an opportunity to get in here, because you want to get in these early. When you buy these short funds, you want to try to get in as soon as you can. So let's just see how this goes. But this is definitely one that will be on my radar for tomorrow. Now, Tesla's putting in a pretty bearish bar right in here. You can see this level right there. We're going to get to that in a moment. But what we're seeing is we're seeing this little level right in here, right? Now we're trying to break down through that, and we haven't done it yet. And you are hitting two key resistance points. You're hitting the 22-day moving average, and you're hitting the 5. Should they break tomorrow and you take out that lower low, you could see this accelerate to the downside. Now, just to be really clear about this, on a basis, we were down 2% on Tesla today. That is not an absolute disaster. This is actually one we did in the Alpha Chasers community. To get on the wait list of the Alpha Chasers community, there is a link here in the top right. Simply click the link and you'll be added to the wait list. See this 136.63 right in here, 136.63. So this was one of my levels. We got to it and then we rejected. I didn't think that it would stay rejected. So from this area, once you started breaking down, that was pretty much it. It just became game on, started pulling back, started looking like it might rally back up again, started trimming our way out of it. Best case today, candidly, I thought we were going to get to this gap fill. We did get to that, but obviously it got a lot worse. Usually on days like today, we have not been seeing this kind of selling. So we did see that, and we did see these levels, resistance levels respected. So there's a couple things that I would focus on with Tesla. These are your key levels. You want to watch 136.63. You're going to want to watch this 128.62 and 125. In other words, if you open in this area, you're going to want to watch that tomorrow for another possible short entry. If you're unable to get over this 128.62, which you were unable to do today, you're going to want to avoid it. And if it starts to roll there, you test 125. If you break 125 to the downside, you're probably heading right in there to that 122.39. Netflix has earnings tomorrow. You're going to want to watch this one as well. So you can see our level right here. Right, see that DTL, how you just acted, downward trend line. And they just kept holding that 323. I tried once, didn't really work too well, rallied into the end of the day. You're going to want to watch this tomorrow. You're going to want to see what type of action. After hours, 10% swings are just going to be pretty commonplace. It's a huge earnings quarter. It's the first earnings quarter that they're going to have since they changed to this ad system, or rather started this new ad system. We can see how you're butting heads right against that 332. Maybe it's going to be earnings that gets us through that. Maybe it's not going to be earnings that gets us through that. We just don't know yet, right? And I think that's the really key for things. Like, no one really knows. What we know is we can state objectively what happened in the day and what it meant in the past, but we just really don't know. So we want to see if it flips. And then if it does, then you could see resistance at this 396 level. I have no idea what those earnings are going to look like. Everyone's speculating. But the thing I will say to you is someone's going to be wrong. You have very large bets being made, long and short. Someone's going to be wrong, which means that we're going to get volatility, which is great for us because we can trade volatility. This is when inflation started. This is when inflation has stopped, meaning it's waning, not that it's over. It's clearly not over, but it's waning. And it is very clear that it is waning. See this line? Look how we got right to it. Rejected, 55. We do not want to close below the 55-day moving average. We just do not want to do that. So we got to watch this very, very carefully. It's an intermediate sell signal for me if we close below that. So the intermediate, not short term. So I would really watch that. My hope is that that does not happen tomorrow, but 277.14 is a huge number for me. It just seems like we've jumped right from inflation, right? Like we've jumped right from inflation to earnings are going to be abysmal. And perhaps they are going to be worse than we think. That is a distinct possibility. No time in history have they ever raised rates the way that this raised them. It's never happened. Now, for those that have been following along in the newsletter, this will look really simple. If you don't get the newsletter, there's a link in description. So click the link and you will get it and be signed up for it. Right when we popped over this, we were in this trade. And I'm going to suggest that we're going to want to watch that 48.04 level again, which just ties in almost perfectly with that 55 SMA on the NASDAQ. You break this, this is really where you want to try. You want to be first in on these types of 3X bear funds. You don't want to be last. So in other words, you want to take the risk as soon as you possibly see some kind of change in trend. This is a pretty powerful bar, right? So we undercut the whole way. Look like we're going to go, close at the highs, completely envelop the previous bar. So that gives us that bullish engulfing. Now, if you flip the higher high after being down 4 or 5 in a row, now we have that added to this hook, this bullish hook pattern. Flip that and didn't go, we could get back up to these levels. It is possible. Are we going to take out the lows again? The one thing I would just say that no one has any idea, and that's not really the game that we should be playing. What we should be focused on is how are we going to make money off of what's happening, and then how can we have good risk management principles around it. That's it, everyone. Have a great evening. Reminder, you have huge data tomorrow. Huge data. 8:30. Fed manufacturing, Fed business conditions, Fed CapEx, all out of Philly. They are highly regarded numbers, as well as you have initial jobless claims and housing starts, building permits, all before 8:30 or all at 8:30 in the morning. Have a great evening, everybody.